And we are live for a special double dose helping of Renters Radio because it's rent control week, folks. It's the new year and we have new things on the agenda. I'm sitting here today on a special edition, Wednesday night edition of Renters Radio with my co host.
Woo! Evan George, hello, hello. Rent
And
Control Week. I like that. That was
Rent
good.
Control Week. That's what it is. And we are sitting here with newly elected Cambridge City Council, Jivan Sobrinho-Wheeler. How are you feeling?
Good, very good.
Thank you for coming in. We have a lot to talk about, and I appreciate you coming in today. We saw you at the rally yesterday. What do we got on the agenda? How are we starting this? I got so many
Quite a
questions
bit,
to ask.
because I'm sure we could spend, we know you have to go, so we could definitely spend just the 20, 25 minutes on the rally yesterday and Mike Connolly's bill, but we really wanted to talk about Cambridge. So
Yeah.
newly elected, they just announced the committee seats and the chairs. Tell us, what do you want? How can we use that to help build influence in Cambridge?
Absolutely, yes. I'm one of 9 Cambridge City Councilors. The only one to have never been a homeowner, the youngest city councilor in Cambridge. I'm going to be chair of the Transportation and Public Utilities Committee and co-chair, along with Denise Simmons, of the Housing Committee in Cambridge. Big priorities for me, so I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. So transportation and housing, those were like the two big 1-2 issues for your campaign. Not a spoiler alert to anyone. DSA backed Jivan. I knocked plenty of doors for him. So I know that those are your two strengths. So the fact that you were allowed on those committees is incredible. What do you want to talk about first, housing or transportation?
I'm down to talk about housing, especially with the bills that just came up yesterday.
All right. What is the housing situation looking like in Cambridge?
In Cambridge, the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $2,300 a month. That's doubled in the past 15 years, along with the price of a to buy. It's gone to $420,000. It's gotten to the point where it's completely out of the range for most folks. And in Cambridge, 2/3 of residents are renters, but we had hardly any on the city council, and that's why we don't have rent control. That's why we don't have tenant right to purchase. That's why we don't have a real estate transfer fee. There's a lot that's sort of out of the Cambridge's hands right now. There's a statewide ban on rent control, which I'm sure we'll talk about with the bills. But there's a lot more we can be doing as well to have more affordable housing, to have more protections for tenants, to have an Office of Housing Stability. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be fighting for.
Can you go into that a little bit more? Because, people watching the show, everyone here, we're familiar with what's going on at the state level, even though we're definitely going to talk about it. But not enough people, myself included, know what can be done at the local level without having to go through the home rule petition and the hellscape that is the State House. So what can Cambridge do? What can the Cambridge City Council do to help alleviate some of this burden, even though, again, we all know a lot of this is federal housing policy and state housing policy?
Absolutely. The big thing, first thing, is you're putting pressure on the state and passing home rule petitions for things like a transfer fee, for rent control, so that the state can't ignore it and say no one is asking for that. There's a lot of things that sort of anything that changes the economic relationship is often sort of regulated by state policy, but there are things. Somerville just passed this Tenancy Notification Act that would require landlords to let tenants know if they're being evicted, all of their rights. There are things like that, and then there are Cambridge has and cities throughout Massachusetts have a lot of power on zoning. There's I live in a triple-decker apartment in Cambridge, like a lot of folks in Somerville, like a lot of folks in Boston. My apartment is illegal to build in large parts of the city still because it's zoned only for detached single-family homes, and a detached single-family home in a place like Cambridge goes for at least $2-3 million, right? So it's illegal for me to live in parts of the city. If you go back a few decades, there used to be redlining that would explicitly keep people of color out of certain parts of the city. We don't have that anymore. But if the only thing you can build are single-family homes in parts of Cambridge, parts of Boston, that's effectively redlining, right? If people of color, where the average wealth is $8 in the Black community, for example, if you can't afford to buy a home in a certain neighborhood, it's basically the same thing as redlining. We can do a lot about that without on our own, without approval from the state as well.
And so you would be able to change some of the ordinances around zoning just at the city level without going through a home rule petition?
Yeah, something like 20% of Cambridge's land right now is exclusively zoned for single family only homes. This is especially sort of in the western parts of Cambridge, like Rattle Street, areas around that. We can change that. We can do that in the next term, and I hope we will.
And you're not talking about changing laws, you're talking about changing zoning.
Yeah, zoning is on the books, on the laws, but it affects what you can build and what you can't build in parts of the city.
And actually, so something about building in the cities, and now we're getting a little bit more to state politics. But Charlie Baker's been trying to push through this bill that'll just make it easier for different communities throughout Massachusetts to approve new development. So
Mhm.
going from a 2/3 to a half and half. I've been critical of that because without other protections like rent control, it's going to be more in local cities' interest to build luxury housing just around
Mhm.
taxing. I'm just very curious. What are your thoughts on that housing bill?
Yeah, it's been super interesting to see and just to see what the legislature will and won't accept too. I think everybody knows we need more housing in parts of Cambridge, Boston, etc. But the reason this was able to go through was because it had the support of the real estate industry, support of developers, and they weren't willing to accept any tenant protections as part of this package too. We had representatives like Mike Connolly saying, like, "Let's." I'm down to see this. Right now, you need a supermajority. You need 2/3 of city councils to approve any change to zoning. That folks like Mike Connolly were saying, sure, let's take it down to a majority, but let's have tenant protections go along with that, right? Let's have more housing, but let's also ensure that people who've lived in these communities that have built communities there can continue to live there, along with adding more housing.
No, same exact rate as me. That's why we endorsed you. Good job.
Yeah.
I think I told you this earlier, but I was playing around in my head with like, what could I ask him that would be like a fun gotcha? But no, you're too good on this. So,
I'm
Yeah.
sure they're
Yeah, that was one of the things he ran on was tenants protections because you're a renter and everything.
yeah, I
So,
have 3 roommates. I think I'm the only city councilor in Cambridge with roommates. But that's, I mean, for so many of us, that's the typical, right? And it's not just a problem at the city level, but of course, state and national politics as well. But just having representation of the kinds of people that live in the city in the government, there's just all these structural problems that make it hard. But
let's go into rent control. Let's go in a little bit of the rally yesterday. So the first people to speak at the public hearing were basically pro landlords. They were from some sort of a group that was advocating that rent control is bad. I think one of the first things we heard
oh man,
what I was trying to text them out, but this woman was speaking so much.
Trinity management.
Was what I think the direct line was economists agree rent control is bad for keeping rents stable. So you just cited that in the last 15 years, rents have doubled once we've gotten rid of rent control. So automatically, what that they just said was false. But just speaking for Cambridge, why do you feel rent control will help the people of Cambridge?
yeah, definitely. I think you see a lot of studies, and by the way, there are plenty of economists that support rent control. If you look at groups like Tenants Together in Massachusetts, they have a lot of studies from folks, economists, looking at the benefits of rent control. But you see all these studies against it and have these sort of wonky arguments for it. And it reminds me of the same arguments you see in support of free trade or something, right? Where on paper, free trade benefits both of most countries, but what you don't talk about is who it's benefiting. And of course, if you get rid of rent control, property values are going to go up. Of course, it creates more wealth on paper in the community. The question is, who is that wealth going to, right? And it's going to property owners. Of course, properties are going to be more valuable if you can increase the rents unlimited. One of the first calls I got as a city councilor was in a property in Cambridge, about 80 units where rents are going up 115% in 1 year. And of course, being able to do that makes that property more valuable for landlords. What it doesn't do is have stable communities there. The whole idea of if you create a community, if you make it a place that people want to live in, you should be able to keep living there as the places become more valuable. As cities have gone through this period of white flight, of disinvestment, of not being valuable. But you had communities of color there the whole time that have sort of held things together. And now that they're becoming more valuable, they have been renters and they aren't going to be able to keep living there, right? That's not right. You should have as much right to keep living somewhere as a renter as you do as a homeowner. There's Prop 2.5 in Massachusetts. There's all of these policies that make things stable for homeowners. Renters don't have that same stability without something like rent.
Yeah, owning a home is built-in rent control. Basically, it's like having a mortgage, especially given a lot of the protections. But that's how it works: is they protect property. What's on the agenda for Cambridge specifically with regards to that? Besides the big bill that we all went to the rally for, that you were speaking in support of, that a lot of new city councils are speaking in support of. What is going? Is there anything going on in Cambridge specifically in terms of bills, in terms of rent control?
There are things that a couple other municipalities have passed, like a real estate transfer fee that would tax homes worth more than $1 million and put that towards affordable housing. Tenant right to purchase, where if you're landlord is selling your home, you and the other tenants would have the right to purchase it, have the first right, and if you can't, cobble together $1 million overnight,
Yeah.
right, you could at least donate that right to a nonprofit, and they could help buy it to keep it affordable. So things like that, I'm hopeful Cambridge can pass. And then Cambridge specifically, there's this interesting affordable housing overlay proposal, which is a little wonky, but would allow buildings that are a little bit taller to be built if they're 100% affordable.
Okay.
And that gets to the thing that I was talking about before, where there are neighborhoods where the only thing you can build is a single family home. This would allow a 4-story building there if it was 100% affordable, if it was public housing or social housing. And it's not going to solve things overnight, but because so many things are exempted by the state, this is one of the things we can do in our own power. And the folks who don't like it are the folks who own these $1 million homes in single family neighborhoods. So it's one thing we can do, and I hope it's something we can pass in the next term as well.
Staying with the transfer tax fee or transfer fee tax, whatever the arrangement of the words is, I know there's a bill going through the House that will make it so every city and town, similar to the rent control bill, you can set your own transfer fee.
Mhm.
And the Boston Globe editorial page basically said it's a good idea, but you can't let city and towns make their own rates, which is BS. They're just taking a pro-development take. So just speaking for Cambridge, if you had the power to, if the state said you can pass a transfer fee tax, what would you want to put that number at?
That's a good question. I think in Cambridge, you we have a residential tax exemption. There are these cases of people who were house rich but cash poor, say, like if they sold their home, moved to Florida, they'd be a millionaire, but while they stay here, if they're on a fixed income. So it might be slightly different here than it is in a town where with different property values. But I think there's still, if you have a home worth $1 million and you're selling it, you should be contributing some of that value into affordable housing. Because you didn't create all the value of that home or that property, right? I worked at a land policy nonprofit before I came here, and one of the big things that it started with is on a land value tax of like your home, you add to it, create to it, but so much of the value of the homes and why prices are skyrocketing is because in the past 15 years, Cambridge has become a really desirable place because Harvard and MIT are there, because there's all this booming biotech in Kendall Square. But as a homeowner, didn't create all that value by yourself, right? So you should when you sell, be contributing some of that value back into affordable housing to keep it an affordable place to live.
And you just brought up Harvard, so now we have to talk about it. Let's talk about the pilot program. As listeners would know, payment in lieu of taxation, because Harvard, regardless of having $40 billion of an endowment, they are a nonprofit and so don't have to commit taxes. They have always pledged a very small amount. They've given even less each year. What can we do to change the pilot system?
Yep. So both Harvard and MIT are in on paper in these contracts that go for one is like a 40-year agreement, but we can and should renegotiate them. They are as nonprofits. They by state law don't have to pay a property tax. But there are all of these other levers that Cambridge has that Harvard depends on that to negotiate that. Their agreement right now goes up 3% per year, something like that. But we know their property tax values have gone up way more than that in that same period. I don't think Harvard, MIT, anyone wants to get in a fight with the city of Cambridge, right? They depend on all of these things to be able to market their universities to folks. They want to maintain that relationship. And so the city council has a lot of leverage there that hasn't always been exerted that I think we can put pressure on. So I think I'm not the chair, but I'm on the Economic Development and University Relations Committee. So I'm interested in tying these, when renegotiating these payments. The one really interesting thing is the fact that they can opt out of payments based on services they're providing. Like they provide a shuttle for their students, right? They're able to count the value of that away from the payments, and that just isn't right.
Like
right?
pottery classes, I think we mentioned before. Free pottery classes.
Boston has a little better deal in terms of negotiating what is and isn't, but yeah, we need it to be much stronger than it is.
So I have one more question about this, and if you want to dodge it, you can. But here's my fantasy. My fantasy is we, and by that I mean just the public, the local city government, does not allow Cambridge to expand. You are done buying properties. We will block every property you try to purchase until we renegotiate the pilot and you stick to it. Is that legal?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff we can do with zoning. The thing is that, like Harvard has been expanding into like Austin Brighton for the same reason too.
Yeah.
But because the municipalities are so small, it's sort of porous that Harvard has options for other things to go into, and it's the same with commercial development. There's this linkage fee where right now, uh, big commercial properties have to pay in. I think it's like $17 a square foot for every building that they're buying. But the thing that's often put to folks like me on the council is, well, if you raise this too high, they're going to go to Somerville, they're going to go to Boston, they're going to go to Chelsea, um, right? Which I don't buy. There's a lot of things
Yeah.
Cambridge has going for it, but also cities should stick together in this way,
Yes.
right? We need to have this regional planning. We need to be not sort of letting us be played against each other because we're all in the same situation right now with not investing enough in transit, with not having enough affordable housing. If we do that, it's the city thing. If we fight, we win. I think that's as much true at the city level.
No, I love it, and I think that's been a vision for a lot of people on the left in Boston. Is Boston, Somerville, Cambridge? We all have to coordinate because there's no way that if Boston, Somerville, and Cambridge all tell Harvard or MIT we're not going to approve the development, they're not going to Chelsea. They're not
No,
going
they're
to
not going to Chelsea.
They're going to stay on the T system, and we have them boxed in.
And
with
they
that.
have the money to spend. They just, like it's not going to stop them from.
Well, you know what? We just rope in the Chelsea City Council. We'll just keep going and just form a massive bubble.
Yeah.
$40 billion endowment. You can afford to do it.
Yeah.
I just add, I think the other thing that I always like try to remember when I talk about Harvard and MIT is that there are it's like a super small number of people when we're talking about these universities that are controlling the endowments, that are controlling the development decisions. Like I know grad students, I know cafeteria workers. All these folks are struggling as much with Harvard and MIT as the rest of us are. It's not, we're not against the universities there. We're not against every grad student or every cafeteria worker. We're against the sort of this top-down model of development, of organizing, of expansion.
And I definitely want to be respectful of your time, and I'd be kicking myself if we didn't talk about transportation. So, as you know this, Jivan made national headlines actually before you even sworn in with one of the proposals you've been backing, which is the free public transportation system. Huffington Post ran a great article about you, contrasting you with New York City, which is spending $250 million on new police to police their transit fares, and then they juxtapose that saying, but we have a newly elected socialist city council member in Cambridge who's saying, why don't we just make it free? So what is your vision for public transportation in Cambridge?
I mean, the final vision is that public transit is a public good, like libraries, like public schools, that should be free. And not the only one to say this, I think, like Michelle Wu, props in Boston, called for it even before I did, that this is the direction we need to be going. And it's a way to also say, let's stop in the current direction, where we just had a fare increase of 6% in 2019 for a service that's as dysfunctional, if not more, than it's ever been. So across the MBTA system, this is a way we should be moving. There's different proposals about maybe we do buses first. Or in Cambridge, I think we also have a lot of revenue that we can do it for ourselves if we're not doing it across the T-wide system. We have a proposal out on our website of how we could do it in Cambridge, doing a bulk purchase of Charlie cards. And that 50% of the population in Cambridge is already qualifies for reduced fares because they are students, because they are elderly, all these different ways, and that if we're purchasing that many T cards, we would get a bulk discount also. And it would be expensive. We think it would be about 10% of the city's budget altogether. But let's move in that direction, right? Let's start with making it free for folks under 18, for seniors, for students, and this is also we sort of framed it in this Green New Deal approach too. Where traffic is the worst it's ever been. The Globe had a great series about how bad it's gotten in Boston and Cambridge. That by improving public transit, by making it free, we not only reduce car emissions, but working class people, people of color, depend on the T to get to work, to get to doctor's appointments, to live their lives. So not only is it a way to fight climate change, but it's a way to improve equity, which I think is what the Green New Deal is about at the national level.
Absolutely, and this is already spreading. Like Lawrence started to open up free buses, and then that had a huge tectonic shift. All of a sudden, the Boston Globe was running articles of like, "Yeah, this makes sense. Why don't we just have more buses?"
Yeah, Kansas City, I think, it just passed all the buses free. Yeah, it's by far not the only place, and there's cities in Europe.
And as you were saying, Michelle Wu has been championing this as well, so it already has a lot of buzz around it. Have you? And I know you just started. Have you started to have more like one-on-one conversations with city council members who, for them, that was such a left field, but now it's back in the norm? Have you started to kind of spread that we should try to get Cambridge to do this first and be like the leader of this community for the free public transportation?
Yeah, I think we have talked with other folks in Boston about it. As chair of the transportation committee, it's a big priority for us. I think the thing that makes it hard is that the MBTA board is appointed at the state level, and so right now with a governor like Charlie Baker, right, it's so much of it is just out of the hands of it. Michelle Wu is a great proposal of having cities in the T area having seats on the board of the T, right? The T doesn't go out into the Western Massachusetts. So these regions where it does go in should have more of a say. It's going to be a big thing as we go into the budget for this year to look at how we can do it in Cambridge, and then as we work more with other municipalities. And I have some meetings with Boston City councilors in the coming week to talk about how we can put the pressure on it for the municipalities where folks really do depend on it.
Awesome. I have a question.
Go.
So I remember Sullivan Courthouse. And that was something that was up to the Cambridge City Council. People canvassed for it pretty hard, turned it into something like affordable housing and not just office space or whatever. It was like kind of a wedge issue in that neighborhood or whatever. And there was one swing vote on Cambridge City Council that ended up making this compromise. Is the council, the newly elected city council currently, would things be different?
Yeah, if I had been voted,
would you have been that vote?
I would have been the swing vote on that and on the affordable housing overlay, right? That both
Yeah.
of these things around affordable housing and public land would have been different if we were on the term. But that, now that vote has happened,
Yeah.
moving forward, and thankfully, with Summer City, we got twice as many units as there were. But all of these things with the organizing, when we started, with Mike Connolly, with all these folks knocking doors, he said, can't get a better deal than 24 affordable housing units. It's not going to happen, so don't try. And after months of it, it didn't go the way we wanted. It's not, public land isn't going to remain in public hands, which was
Right.
the goal there. We do have twice as many affordable housing units as there were. But in the long run, we should be looking at these public assets and staying in public for things like the community land trust. There isn't a ton of public land in Cambridge. The parts we do, including some, public parking lots, we should be looking at, can we turn this into public housing?
Okay. Definitely keep us informed on that, because I would love to see a movement like that come up where there's actually a chance to win now. Do you know if there's anything on the I don't want to say chopping block, but like about to be sold to developers or anything that people are willing to rally around right now? Now that city council might be able to help.
Yeah, there are a couple properties that we can do more with. There's this Vale Court, which if you've been in Central Square is really near the T stop. It's
right.
Yeah, just one block from the T there, which the city took by eminent domain a few years ago and has just sat vacant since then. Sort of gotten tied up in court. I'm as urgently as we can. That should be dense affordable housing with a community garden next to it.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we're pushing for. I think the other thing in Cambridge I want to see happen in the next 2 years is start a community land trust done in Somerville. In a CLT, you can buy a house, build equity for it, but the land itself remains in the community, and so because of that, there's a requirement that it remain affordable and that the price not increase more than 5% or so a year. And so you don't have these things like we're seeing in Cambridge where the price doubles every 5 to 7 years or so. The largest community land trust in the U.S. is in Burlington, Vermont. It was all started by Bernie Sanders while they're there, and I think the second one is actually in Boston, the Dudley Square Neighbors Initiative.
Okay.
Yeah, Somerville, 2 DSA city councilors there, Ben Ewan-Campen and JT Scott helped get it started. We need one in Cambridge. So
yeah.
I'm anxious to see what we can do.
That would be something you can make a move on now.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get a task force around it, get a
Cool.
board set up, and yeah, certainly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like to see something like that happen too, especially given the compromise with the Safety Courthouse. It kind of opened my eyes to what's been happening. A couple other quick things, not really related to housing, but there was the facial recognition bill that was that your first vote?
It was, first vote happened on Monday. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, good job. So far, so good. I guess that was to ban facial recognition software in Cambridge used by the Cambridge Police Department or the state.
yeah. Cambridge Police. Cambridge has now passed it on with a couple other municipalities like Somerville. But it's the idea. Not that this was like rampant in Cambridge right now, although we have seen plenty of uses of it in China, and it's been demoed by places in Massachusetts. But it's just wildly ineffective, especially for people of color. A way is more likely to misidentify a black person than it is a white person. Is more likely to read a black person. There's some applications where it tries to guess what you're feeling based on your expression.
Yeah. Actually, there was a Cambridge startup that developed some of that software.
It's just incredibly. So it will read black folks' faces as hostile, like while they're smiling. It's just completely not inappropriate. And I think the ACLU makes the good point of even if you did have all the kinks mixed out, it's the same thing as having a barcode on your face, right? Where you go at any time, even if you think your police department is great, in the wrong hands, this technology could be used to monitor protests, could be monitored.
And it's all going into a database, which is probably insecure.
Absolutely.
And so I appreciate your vote on that. I appreciate Cambridge, making the preemptive step to ban facial recognition software. I think that'd be a huge problem in the future, and I would have to walk around with insane clown pops and face paint on my face anytime I entered the boundaries of Cambridge. So that was your first vote. What else has come up this week?
There was a vote on extending this tree protection moratorium. We're losing 11 acres of trees right now per year in Cambridge, and there's a big study on it, still figuring out if it's small properties, people just going out on their yard and adding a deck and cutting it down, or if it is related to some of the larger developments in Cambridge. But the city passed the moratorium last year to halt tree cutting with exemptions for affordable housing and things, but it's set to expire in March. There was a vote to extend it. I think it will end up getting extended. There was a weird vote around whether it should be sent to committee or not. Quentin Zondervan and I were the two counselors who were just said, let's vote on it. Let's
nice.
get it done. But yeah, I think that's a big one. I think preparing for climate change is the other big priority for us in Cambridge. Of already seeing flooding on days where it's rain, seeing temperatures rising, especially in more working class neighborhoods that have fewer trees. That as much as we can do to sort of reduce the heat island effect, and trees are a part of that.
And have you been working closely with Quentin on all that stuff? I know that Sunrise endorsed both of you for that.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Awesome. I think that he's going to be chair of the Health and Environment Committee while I'm chair of the committee. So I'm excited to see.
Yeah, it'd be good to see you work together, especially because it's not like Cambridge doesn't have the money.
Yeah, I think the big issue that I see in Cambridge overall is that 30, 40 years ago, Cambridge was a totally different space where Kendall Square was vacant, and the whole priority of the council and the government was how do we get more commercial development, economic activity, just stuff going on there. Cambridge is just in a wildly different position. Even if you ever thought it was good to just turn things over to commercial activity at one point, that we are not at that point anymore, where the big issues are affordable housing, their transit, they're preparing for climate change. That things have been working pretty well if you're a property owner, if you're a taxpayer. Commercial or property taxes are pretty low in Cambridge compared to other places. Those aren't the issues anymore. We have lots of Kendall Square is booming right now.
Yeah.
The issues are how are you getting around in Cambridge? How are you affording to live in Cambridge?
So I know you have to leave, and we've already held you a little bit over the time that we said. I have a closing question, unless obviously Big Boss gets to decide when you leave. So she calls the show here. But a lot of what you and me talked about, and a part of your platform was about how you wanted to use the office to not stop your role as an organizer, but to help make you a better organizer. And this is definitely a conversation that we're going to continue to have with you. And by that, I say we, like DSA and kind of like the left groups. But How do you see kind of like the people supporting you with this effort? How do you see your role as now a city council member? And you kind of talk about how much of you internalize that. Like, do you feel different the fact that now you are a politician, you are part of the system? And how do you see you're going to do it differently than what most politicians would do?
Yeah, it's the big question that we're, wanted to run to keep lifting up these movements, I think, and that folks that come from these organizing movements are then just a lot more effective when you think of Bernie Sanders. In Cambridge, one of the things Shane and I have talked about, my council aide Shane Willie is sitting right next to me.
Shout out, Shane.
Yeah.
Shout out to Shane.
Is having a tenant organizing summit sometime in the next year. That there has been this history in Cambridge of sort of radical tenant organizing. Back when we had rent control, that was the fight all the time, and Cambridge was keeping that. But that it's as folks have gotten priced out, it's gotten harder to keep that going. We want to have an organizing summit for renters, the vast majority of the population in Cambridge, and get more tenant organizing going in the places where we live. And then also, I've gone to DSA meetings since getting elected, housing working group meetings, general meetings. I met with someone from Sunrise earlier this week to as much, be a voice for them in the council as sort of, just saying, these are our priorities. Can you turn people out to them? Making sure that it's going the other way. And how can we be lifting up your priorities with the seat in the council? Of that, just the only way that we're going to get these done is in these movements. I think there's so much in the sort of electoral politics. We think we'll just get a couple smart people elected. They'll take things from there. We can stop worrying about things, and that's not the model we can have anymore. Right? Where we have to get folks elected, we have to keep having them be part of these movements if we're going to get change done.
So I take it you're not taking money from developers?
I have not.
It'd be awesome if right now you're just like, well, I said I wouldn't, but like, oh, God damn it, Jivan.
But the only way that stays viable is if we have another option. I'm really interested to see what we can do with public election financing or things in Cambridge.
Oh, yeah.
Right? In New York, they have, you make a donation of $100. The Democracy Fund will match it 8-1. Cambridge that matches 0-1. Right? There's all these other interesting models out there that Cambridge doesn't have right now. I'm really
just because I have you talking about it, can you talk about Seattle's model? Because theirs is my favorite.
Yep. Yeah, they have a democracy voucher system, which was designed by a Harvard professor, right? Even though Cambridge doesn't have anything, where they give everyone, every voter in Seattle, basically $100 in monopoly money. I think they're called democracy vouchers that they can donate to any candidate they want. And it just changes the game in terms of who they're able to run. There was a DSA candidate out there, Sean Scott, who just maxed out on them. But right now, anybody can vote, anybody can have a say in democracy. But if you can't, donate, if you can't, in Cambridge, you can donate up to $1,000, and that changes the ball game in terms of who's able to run. I don't know a lot of people who can write $1,000 checks. But if you can get folks to donate $25 of a democracy voucher, not only does that make it easier for me to run, there's all of these folks who are working 2 jobs, who can't do call time from 6 to 9, calling the people they know from their golf club or from law school, that are then able to run, and it changes the shape of what democracy feel like.
And my favorite part about that is how, like, when people receive, I just had this really horrible flight experience, and like I got a $50 voucher. So now I feel like if I don't use it, I'm going to lose $50.
Mm-hmm.
So I love and I think they've shown it increases voter turnout, because when you tell people you have $100 to go spend on a candidate, if you don't spend it, you lose it. It almost creates an incentive of, oh, I'm going to spend 10 minutes of my day, look up the candidates. I'm going to now make sure they get this money, and now it increases your investment in that candidate. It increases your investment in voting itself.
Mm-hmm.
So Seattle's my favorite model. If you can get that done in Cambridge, oh my God.
That'd be amazing.
Right? It would be really exciting. I'm really excited to see what we can do. I think there's support for it on the council. There's just got to figure out how to get it done. It's like all of these things where, there are priorities, and unless you have someone pushing for it, it's not going to happen. Hoping we can push for it.
I'm excited for Cambridge.
Me too.
That sounds good.
No, I was going to say, thank you so much for coming on. I've considered you a close friend, and I think one of the first times that you announced you're going to run, we were in your kitchen talking about it, and I'm just like, yeah. So if you betray us, like, it ends the electoral cycle, just because like you're a great person and we all believe in you as a candidate and now as a city council member. So
Yeah, we'll be watching you.
oh yeah, I mean, we'll be watching you.
I think that's the biggest thing that I am concerned about. I got to meet Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez super briefly when she was in Cambridge at one point, and she said the biggest thing she was worried about was not that she wasn't going to be able to get stuff done or that people were going to shut her down. It's that the movements that helped elect her would then just take a break or focus on something else, and that the only way she knew she was going to get stuff done is if these movements stayed engaged. So yeah, I hope people will hold me accountable and help me get stuff done. So that's awesome.
That's what we're here for. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been great. Let's have you back on again. And when some more stuff gets done, I would love to keep updated about what's happening in Cambridge now that we have somebody on the council that's working for us.
And thank you so much for having me. Just having a show that gets out things about renters and priorities too, because it's not what you always hear in the sort of main coverage.
And I thank you, Shane. I think this is all your brainchild. So props to Shane. You picked a great age, Jivan.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely appreciate it. I know that you have to go, so we're gonna take a quick break. We got to get some photos, and then we'll be back with I don't know, whatever we feel like. We'll probably talk some more about rent control.
And we might go into national politics just to change it up because it's a Wednesday episode. Maybe open up the phone line. So if anyone wants to call in again and debate me on national politics, let's have it out.
We could do that. Rod Weber, what's up?
Yeah.
I know who's calling.
But yeah, Jivan, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back.
We'll be back.
We're live. We're back, right?
We're back.
Yes,
doing
you
it?
are.
We're doing
We're
it
live.
Doing it live.
All right. So
Great interview.
yeah, thank you to Jivan Sobrinho-Wheeler for coming on. If I said that right.
You did.
Talking about how
Jivan rhymes with Steven.
Jivan rhymes with Steven.
We even put it on his campaign literature just because everyone thought that was a very cute way of signaling how to pronounce his name.
Certainly helpful. We're back. We have our round 2, part 2 of this episode. Special episode, rent control special, on Renters Radio. It's just me and Evan now.
I know, it feels so quiet in here. Because now I'm just so used to guests. And this is definitely going to be we'll say a little bit more of a laid-back segment. Even though we still have one thing that definitely deserves a serious amount of attention, the video. I'm not going to go right into it right now. But as you and I were talking about, like, how will this be covered by the Globe and the Herald and the press? I don't think there's anyone who disagrees with the statement that housing is probably the biggest issue in Boston right now. Maybe the second biggest issue. And then after this big public hearing that we had around this housing bill, what do you think the lead story was in the Boston Globe?
Today? It should have been rent control considering how many people were there and how many rooms they had to fill.
Yeah, and I mean, again, how many weeks, months, years people have been talking about the housing crisis in Boston? You would be wrong. Anyone want to guess what was the lead story? Boston Globe today.
I don't have the Globe.
I mean, for the sports people out there, and this did make the front page. Alex Cora is no longer coach of the Red Sox, but that actually wasn't even the lead story. Something beat Alex Cora. Front page, A1, Boston Globe. King Tut exhibit is coming to the museum.
Wait!
Can you believe that? That. From an issue like housing, which we've heard every article of every weekly thing of the Boston Globe. I mean, every publication has at least had one housing story for the past weeks, if not months.
Yeah.
And when you finally have the big public hearing on one of the biggest bills that have gotten the most attention throughout Massachusetts, it was the #1 trending thing. Yes, was it yesterday? I have no concept of time. Yes.
It was the #1 trending.
It was the #1
on Twitter.
Yep.
It was like the Lift the Ban mask.
Was this? They decided to go with the King Tut Museum. Who gives a shit? Who was going to see that?
I thought they already had a King Tut in MFA.
I don't know, but to lead with that, and they didn't even, I mean, the A section is generally national global news.
Right.
They didn't even put it in the metro section.
Where was it?
You had to go to the business section.
Oh my God.
To even just see what happens. The article, and so this is like the writers don't get to pick where it is. So I don't know.
It wasn't just below the fold; it was buried.
Yeah, and the Herald did the same thing. The Herald put it in their business section. But Tim Logan of the Globe, he wrote a good article about it. was very fair that actually captured it, talking about the issue of rent control and definitely, didn't like both sides it. The Herald had a little bit more
Yeah.
of, oh, well, two different sides disagree. But even if you read it, it was still trending towards what the overall consensus was, that the 300 people, 400 people who showed up, they supported rent control, and the 3 people who were paid by landlords did not. So even though I don't like where it was placed in the newspapers, and I haven't checked the editorial section to see if, I don't know, Jeff Jacoby has some dumbass thing to say about it, but I was happy with the coverage. So thank you, Tim Logan. Generally does do a good job.
All right, well, that's good. I mean, I know there was a few more landlords quoted than I would have liked, or a little bit. I think there was more both sides than necessary for this, because most of the arguments the landlords, or developers, we should say, not even, there was landlords for rent control there.
Yeah, there was,
Um,
and that's why I didn't like how the Herald, like, not their title, but like the subsection was renters and landlords disagree on rent control.
right.
And which, as we were just saying, is not the case. One, the bill itself says that multifamily housing, 3 units, you're excluded. And this is something that I talked.
I think it's 6 if it's owner occupied.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, I was
Oh.
looking at that today. I think it might actually be
I
more
probably
than
would
that.
have lessened that if I got to.
I
write
know,
that down.
I know.
But,
I would have been a little tougher on it
but
too.
and I say this to my friends, some of which have bought housing as an investment, is like, you're not who we're going after.
Yeah, it's going after companies,
Yeah,
not
I'm going
individuals.
after some German hedge fund that
Yeah.
owns 6,000 units. So this is not a renters versus landlord issue. This is a people versus corporation issue first.
Yeah.
So if you're a landlord out there, you're all right. Just be on our side, and we won't bash you. So that's fine. Did you want to talk about Oakland?
I want to talk about Oakland a little, because this is something I was actually looking at last week, and then it kind of came to a head yesterday. Was these Oakland moms it was a group called Moms for Housing, a group of mothers who are basically occupying vacant homes in Oakland, or actually just one home that's owned by a developer, and building a life there and making a statement with that. Got evicted with tanks and,
They use something called like a mad cat.
yeah, I tweeted the picture. It's a weapon of war. It's basically a tank. They had, a bunch of groups showing up to support them. Nobody was violent. But the police definitely said a statement of who they're working for by bringing in such a militant force to kick these moms out of an unoccupied vacant home that it was basically speculative developers just buying it, and they in fact even set up, I forget what nonprofit they were working with, but they were trying to buy that home at the price the developers bought it for, and that was denied.
And
so then, like, they are trying to make money off it, clearly, and kicking these women out, these like single mothers who are, trying to have a home. And I guess like this is a huge problem in Oakland, where there's tons of unoccupied houses and tons of homeless people. You'd think you could be able to fix that with something like that. Seems like an easy solution. Just put them all in homes. But it was pretty drastic, and I think they occupied it since mid-November.
Actually, Herb, do we have the video loaded up for that?
Yeah,
right,
let's play the video.
Yeah, let's play that, and then we'll take it from there.
Saying housing is a human right. Their name is Moms for Housing.
This is a video by Brandon Jordan and Marianne Mickelberg.
My name is Dominique Walker. I am one of the co-founders of Moms for Housing, and the goal of our organization is to reclaim houses back into the hands of the community and to house unsheltered moms and children. There's 4 vacant houses for every 1 homeless person in Oakland.
We are reclaiming this house from a billion-dollar corporation who bought this house at a foreclosed price. It has been vacant for 2 years while people are living out on the street.
We felt like this was necessary to take this step. Like, even when I personally tried to go through the proper channels to get help to move and be able to pay these rents, they're still not affordable. So I feel like it was up to us to organize ourselves to be able to have housing.
In the last 2 years.
Okay. So that video from Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, talked about on the show. If you want to know, how does Evan just keep up with all this stuff? follow Amy Goodman. She was a light in the dark for decades, and she's still going strong. Wanted to make sure I cited her. Did you hear the statistic of how many vacant homes there are per homeless person? They just mentioned quickly in that clip.
Oakland, yeah, it's four per homeless person.
So, like, I just want everyone to just sit with that. We could, and I think we said this at an earlier episode, we could, if you just wanted to solve homelessness, you could give every homeless person in Oakland a house. You could give them a summer vacation home. You could give them a winter vacation home. And you would still just have a spare house per person that you could just open up, which is vacant. The property that in the group is called Moms for Housing occupied. It was bought 2 years ago and it's sat vacant for 2 years. I think it's
it was bought as a foreclosure.
Yes, and and that's next up. So this is just a corporation, I think in Germany, they didn't mention in that clip, bought this house 2 years ago. It's just, again, Appendix B on some billionaire's hedge fund list that they will never look at, nobody went into. This, I think it was 2 families or 1 family who has been homeless. They knew that this was vacant and they just made it their home, I think, for the last few months. And it was bought at a foreclosed price. We haven't really talked about, I mean, we've mentioned it, but the housing bubble which crashed, which led to the Great Recession of like 2007, 2008. But very quickly, the Obama administration had a choice. They could have either given money, the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, depending on how you look at it. You could have given that to the people who took on these bad loans, or you could have given it to the banks that gave the bad loans. And they went to give the money to the banks that gave the bad loans. So they got to get reimbursed through our tax dollars, but then they got to still own the properties. And then what you had, and Steve Mnuchin, who was our Treasury Secretary, this is how he made his coin, was once now you had all these foreclosures, there was a group of private equity firms that then went in and bought up all these houses. So you had people that were taken advantage of by banks that didn't give a shit about the loans they were given, that told these families you can afford this because they knew at the bottom line they weren't going to be held accountable. They weren't held accountable. They got the houses back anyway, and then all this real estate development got to buy them at these lower prices, like on all these hedge funds. And now they just sit vacant as vacant properties. Complete fucking bullshit. Sorry.
And also, these entire neighborhoods are like just full of empty houses that,
yeah.
You know, it's basically like.
And we talked about that in Boston as well. It's just empty towers.
Yeah.
And because a certain choice was made, I'm going to put this on the Obama administration again. A choice was made that we wanted to value a corporation getting to make money off of this over a family's or a person's right to have shelter. That was just a conscious choice that we made because of a lack of imagination, because of the neoliberal period we've been living in for decades. And these mothers formed this group saying that's bullshit. We should put people first. It's a vacant house. I'm going to move in there with their family.
With kids.
Yeah, with kids. So back to the police response. Well, like, just think of that as a situation. And then think of how are we going to address that? You can be sitting there and saying, okay, I understand, but we can't just let people occupy vacant housing, which, as this group talks about, like, they're not going for some small-time landlord who, like, they went away for a week, so they snuck in. This is a vacant property. The police response was how many people do you think the police used? Like, from those video clips?
It was a lot. It was also a lot of, like, hardware.
Yeah. They probably spent $1 million.
Yeah.
Easy estimate. I think, like, what I saw was over a dozen special forces with semi-automatic rifles, full fatigues, full body armor. They used a drone to go into the house first.
Like they were like dangerous. These mothers with children.
And then they brought in that Mad Cat truck.
Yeah.
God knows the overtime payments they paid. They could have just given it to this family and just said, this is just a failure of our system that you had to do this. Here's a fraction of what we just spent to traumatize you and your family.
And they put up a giant fence around the property afterwards.
And there was a lot of great community like protests around it.
Yeah, they actually had a big party about it last night.
Because it took the police 2 days to complete this effort, and then
with no violence. The people didn't fight back.
No, it's a family with kids.
And I guess they each had to pay $5,000 bail, which is ridiculous. And it just shows who the police are really working for and what they're there to protect. Certainly, you would think that the right to housing and safety, which is what comes inherently with housing for mothers and children, would be a priority for any sort of protective force. But clearly, it was just some giant corporation's money. In fact, we even did raise money with, I think it was a couple different charities to try to buy the house at the price the house was bought for, which should be some kind of right.
I mean,
If it was a
yes.
foreclosure, you know, like, and like, oh, if we need this house and you are just trying to sit on it and make money when the property values go up, why can't you just sell it like for what you bought it and it's not even a loss? Like, that's so cold. Like, at a certain point, do you care about people or not? Like I always say. And then another reason this actually hit really close to home for me is that I've always been saying ever since EMF, when we occupied that for like 3 months and didn't get arrested, I was like, oh, we could just do this.
No, yeah, and
we could just do this. And I still think we should, but it's like, they're not going to come in with tanks and cops and guns and evict us forcefully. Because renters have rights. We can just do this and we can win. And I'm scared.
Yes, and it's very easy for me to right now just signal the rallying call to get people to do this. I recognize that I have never just declined to pay my rent, and I've never just put my body on the line to like the term is squatting, and I think that's
well, we have, and it actually worked out better than expected. And I thought that's why I should tell everybody to do it.
It does
and now
work,
I'm scared,
and
like,
especially when you have what is a nationwide crisis around housing.
Yeah,
like this does need to be a tool in our toolbox. That if like the legislation. Like if the Massachusetts state legislature fails to pass rent control, if they say no, like we need to start looking at, and we're going to create a better term for it because I think squatting is meant to have a negative connotation to make it seem like to demoralize you, to use that shame is I think like a thing I talked about before.
Yeah,
they try to make you feel like you're a piece of shit for doing this action, which like any parents who are just trying to provide a shelter for their children should not be made to feel that. We're going to think of a cool name for squatting. That just
occupying.
I like occupying. Yeah. Okay. We already solved it. Thank you for that. But yeah, I think that does need to be a tool in a toolkit. But full solidarity with Moms for Housing.
Yeah. I guess they raised the money for the bail and GoFundMe.
They did.
And I mean, I'm not sure if they can afford the house at market value. I would like to see it purchased at below market value or just given to them. Or hopefully the media blows us up enough for people at a certain point have a heart and call upon Wedgwood Properties is the name of the property management developer that owned the housing, and calls on them to knock it off. And just like, this is such bad press, guys.
Yeah, but again, it's like the billionaires that invest in this, like they don't know that was one of their properties. This is all, again, like they never see this. This is just they pay somebody to manage their money. They subcontract it out to other agencies to manage the money, and it's just a line item on someone's Google Excel sheet.
And one of the main questions I have that I don't know who has the answer is, would this happen in Massachusetts? This response? They occupied that building since November 19th.
Yes.
I don't know what the conditions in there were. I'm assuming mothers with children probably fairly safe. Would they come in with tanks like that? I mean, I would have said no until recently when I've seen some responses to other things. I really did think that there was a certain amount of, I guess they had to get a court order before they did this. I'd be interested to see what the likelihood of something like this in Massachusetts would be and how long people could kind of go occupying a building like
I think
that.
so I absolutely think they would, and I think the trick is you go really hard with the first person that does it or the first group that does it to try to deter others. I would say if we are going to use this as a strategy, we're going to use it strategically, and by that I mean I'm going to do it maybe 4 weeks before an election. We're going to start occupying a place because then that'll put a lot of pressure on politicians who know this will make them look bad.
Wait, what, are we going to do that?
I don't know. We'll think about it.
It'll be fun.
But I'm saying if you, to do this, and obviously if you're a family seeking shelter, and right now you're thinking this is a good idea, go do it. Hit us up on DSA. But, and I'm saying allegedly, meaning if legally I'm not allowed to say that publicly, this is all just, in the game. We're just talking right now. I'm not sure how much we can advocate breaking laws, but obviously put your needs first.
I mean, I can advocate breaking whatever law I want because I'm not beholden to any DSA.
Oh, no, trust me.
I will tell you, I think it's the right thing to do. I think that people deserve to have housing, and I really, really want everyone to stick it to developers any chance they get.
Yeah,
so.
But
I also want everyone to be safe.
Yeah, and this does need to be another tool in our toolkit. I didn't anticipate me getting so mad in this segment.
I was so mad when I saw this.
But the second I saw it in my thing, we wanted to talk about it.
Because I've been following it. I was following it all last week. I was admiring them. I'm like, oh man, I hope they can just get it and keep it. And like, there's some sort of like somebody somewhere with power has a heart, and somehow they are able to live there, and this becomes a model, and people can just do this, and it's frustrating to see, of course, the cops working for property owners as usual.
So there was another thing that really pissed me off, and since I'm kind of just on an emotional level,
All right.
I want to talk about it.
Let's go.
New Bedford installs anti-homeless architecture, and I think you're familiar with this.
Yeah.
But the phrase anti-homeless architecture is something that you see in a lot of cities. Sure, we have it here in Massachusetts. What it is it's a recognition of you have homeless people, you have poverty. We talk about this a lot in the Boston Common. And rather than addressing those needs, communities say, why don't we just put spikes where these people like to stand?
Yeah, put spikes on the...
Why don't we just put dividers on the park bench so that you can't physically lay down comfortably? And what they did in New Bedford here in Massachusetts was a few people got angry that people were... They used the phrase panhandling. And just people who would just, buy your car at four-way intersections who come by asking if you have any change. That's what they're referring to. Rather than addressing that, rather than trying to create maybe a homeless shelter or try to have some programs and services for these people, the city council decided that they're going to spend money to create concrete 45-degree angles rather than a flat plane so that, and one city councilor said it, so that they could stand... I have to find the direct quote. And he was speaking...
Stand on spikes.
Yes. They stand on the spike stones and continue to beg. This is the morally visionless approach to starting our new term. Again, this was their first thing. We just had Jivan, Sobrinho-Wheeler on to speak about the first thing the Cambridge City Council did. I don't like hyping politicians. The first thing they did was ban facial recognition. One of the first things New Bedford City Council did was install concrete spikes so that when people beg for money because they have no alternative to eat, it can just be more painful for them, and hopefully that'll leave them alone. You fucking believe that? And in California, like the city passed creating gigantic boulders on the sidewalk so that you couldn't lay down to try to deter people from building up temporary shelters.
They call it other things too. They call it is anti-homeless architecture, but they call it defensive architecture or hostile architecture, defensive design. There's a bunch of nicer terms that architects or planners use to be like, oh, we're gonna put this spiky thing here so no one can lay down on it safely. There's also people who build hacks around it. I've seen come up different just get mattresses or actually that packing tape, that foam stuff, and just lay it on every bench you see with spikes so that people can A, sit comfortably, and B, sleep comfortably. And it's cheap enough and thick enough to actually just block all that out. It depends on the architecture, but there are there's a whole, as much as they're building up these different methods of stopping anti-homeless or stopping homeless people from resting comfortably, there's also a lot of interesting ingenuity to hack around that too.
Yeah, that's all great.
I know.
No.
I know.
But we should highlight more of those hacks.
I know. I scroll by it and I save it. I can't find it right now, but you bring it up.
Very quick. I forget what you even call it. Detour. We talked about the New York City fair hikes, and these people released this quick 20-second video about all different ways that you could jump a turnstile to show people in a creative, almost like YouTube parkour way. Of oh, hey, if you just want to jump the turnstile, you can try this approach. So I think we need to be promoting that. Maybe Renters Radio first video could be life hacks around anti-homeless architecture.
Yeah.
But for people in Massachusetts...
I can't believe they're doing that in Massachusetts.
And exactly. And for people in Massachusetts who, you hear about the concentration camps on the southern border in Texas, and you think, how can you have that? How can you live with those camps right next door? A, we have ICE detention facilities here in Massachusetts. But B, this is the same thing. Anti-homeless architecture, New Bedford creating concrete spikes to cause pain to people who have no other choices than to beg for their money.
Or to cause them to trip and fall into traffic. It's not really protecting them. Some people are using the argument that it's, oh, well, we can't have these people walking in the median. begging
Yeah,
for
that's
money.
complete bullshit.
Because
that's complete.
This is even worse because they're gonna trip and fall because
Yeah.
these are actual mountains of like spiky stones that they're still gonna walk over, and it's just gonna be more dangerous for everybody.
Anyone who's advocating, oh no, we're having these spikes because we don't want people to have to walk across traffic, and this is going to make everyone safer. That is an argument that you use in the mirror so you can sleep at night,
Right.
so that you can still say that you are a morally good person for doing this. But this type of response is the same response that we're having with immigration, which is basically segments of society that the majority class is viewed as just expendable. And so we are going to cause them pain.
Expendable and also even worse, like annoying. Like they don't want to be presented with this crisis.
Yeah.
They don't want to look at it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to have to feel like guilty as they drive along in their nice cars and somebody asks them for change. They want to say that like it's not their problem.
Yeah, they just don't want to see it.
They don't want to see it.
And then they want to donate some money to a charity around Christmas time and go live a great life.
Yeah.
But yeah, New Bedford, go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm from New Bedford.
Oh, do you have any
born and raised.
Any thoughts on your city council members spending tax dollars in New Bedford?
You want me? You're
Here we go. Oh man.
All right, so let's talk about New Bedford for a quick second.
All right.
New Bedford, part of, as we know, Moby Dick was written there.
Would you mind just quickly
quick
introducing
history.
yourself? Introducing yourself.
It doesn't matter who I am. It doesn't matter who I am. I was born and raised in New Bedford, and that's about as much as people need to know about someone from New Bedford. My father was a fisherman. His father was a fisherman. My mom's father was a fisherman. Her brother was a fisherman. Her brother's brother was a fisherman. So it's pretty much a line of horrible heroin epidemics. That's pretty much what the city is. So for the most part, if heroin or illegal labor has something to do with what you're talking about, then most likely that person was a shitbag. But the people there, phenomenal people, I will say.
All right.
New Bedford, great place. The people who are elected to it, horrible. Horrible people. Now, what were you talking about?
So you just distracted me with bringing up Moby Dick.
Yeah, no, that's great. Moby Dick was partly written there. It was a whaling city and a textile city for quite some time. Then eventually all that stopped because, that could be outsourced to Japan and China. Mostly the whaling. No.
I don't know why, but whenever somebody mentions Moby Dick, I just have to go off on a thing. Have you ever read Moby Dick?
It's awful.
It is horrible.
It's an awful, awful book.
Like
I don't suggest anyone read it.
Yeah, but everybody's read the first sentence.
No, because that's not the first sentence.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I know, right?
Busted.
What's the first sentence?
Something about Ishmael.
That's not the first sentence.
I don't read, okay?
If you were, most people get the abridged version. You want the unabridged
Wait, it was
version.
pretty long.
I know.
All right, here's my thing that I always go into.
Okay, yes.
It was not meant to be a novel.
No, it was never meant to be a novel. It was supposed to be an account of a man sailing.
It was, Herman Melville basically got, you have X amount of space per week.
Right.
So he purposely padded it with unnecessary just verbiage and all this stuff.
He was just at a hotel that was down the street from where I grew up and just drinking and eating a bunch of seafood and then just padding out a book the whole time.
Just to, I don't know if he was actually drunk. I'm going to go with it. Just to pay for his tab. He had to keep filling space. There's a part in Moby Dick where he describes when you enter, what's called a storm door. Like when you enter a restaurant and then there's another set of doors, 6 steps in front of it. It's a storm door to keep the wind and the air. He wrote 3 pages describing the inside of that for no other reason. Well, one, maybe he just was going to bars all the time. But second was to pad it. It's a horrible novel.
Yeah, he was in the
It was
hotel.
no longer in print in its lifetime.
Yeah, the hotel I used to wash dishes for, it's still up, the hotel that he stayed at.
It's not a good book. It's not a good book.
No, it's awful. But, you have to remember that New Bedford is the same place where Bill Clinton, went down in the voting for the primaries and told people to vote for Hillary Clinton. And he was 10 feet from the polls, and people were like, you can't do that. That's extremely illegal.
Yeah.
You can't
Dude,
go...
he's Bill Clinton. He can do whatever he wants.
But that's what it is. Mitchell, who was the mayor at the time, said, no, that's more than fine. And it was the most, aggressive, version of, you can't campaign in front of a poll. It's my wife is running for the president, and I think you should vote for it. And the second, I'm not going to lie, if I seen Bill Clinton, despite all the horrible crimes and murders that he's done, I am still going to shake his hand and vote for his wife. Because he's charming as hell, all right? I'm not going to go around and beat around the bush on something like that. The man has a smile that I'm attracted to,
And
all right?
he can play the...
Bernie Sanders is a hunched-up
saxophone.
man that is promising me something that smile cannot,
I don't think Bernie Sanders smiles.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
There's a bit of a scowl to it, but I mean, at the end of the day, I see a smile like that, and I'm like, that's not fabricated enough for politics.
You have to give me a fake smile while you make my life materially worse.
Listen, kiss my baby and tell me that you love me,
Yeah.
all right? I need that. And Bernie Sanders just can't do that for me. He looks at my baby and he says, I don't know if that kid's going to grow up to be everything that you expect it to be. And I say, sir, stop lying to me. I need that reassurance that everything is going to be okay. And, that's what Bernie Sanders can't do. But Bill Clinton apparently can tell a bunch of people in front of a New Bedford primary poll that apparently was a very big deal in the Massachusetts area, because getting Bernie to, be the candidate there would have been a giant step in, like, a lot of, like, the southeast area, We're considered the armpit of Massachusetts, because if you look at that little arm that sticks out on Massachusetts, take a look at a map and see that arm. Just look where the armpit would be. That is New Bedford right there. You will see us there, just proudly taking up any slime and sludge and turning it into food.
Bedford's
for
like the
people there.
Lynn of the South.
Ooh, that's sure.
Or like the Worcester.
Yeah, the Worcester. Okay.
Yeah.
See, the thing is that we look at all those places and we want to fight them.
Yeah, you're all
Fall
rivals.
River and New Bedford are in a constant fight for who is the most useless part of.
Hey, I've been to some
Massachusetts.
dope loft parties in Fall River, okay?
And yeah, you know something? I'm sure you have, and I'm sure you've been high out of your mind and not sure that you were even in Fall River, because Fall River is a horrible, horrible place.
Listen,
It
I was in
needs to burn
college.
to the ground.
God.
But that's the thing. That's the kind of jest that we have from a person from New Bedford to Fall River. We both say, hey, why aren't you, in flames and constantly? I mean, Fall River just got their mayor just got a bunch of trouble. FBI was investigating him because he is a screw up, and he's like 25 or 27 or something, and thought he could just do everything that people do in Fall River, but on like a mayoral scale.
Like I want to look at his like Netflix history, because
Yeah.
how he ran the town was he would just hire like Jivan had like an aide. He would hire an aide and say, all right, but like you have to give me like 15% of your pay, right?
Right,
And
yeah.
this is what he did to like all the employees.
Everyone. So I was actually lucky enough to work at the Portuguese Club, which is a very small little area in Fall River that you can go on Main Street, and I was one of the caterers there. I cooked the food and washed the dishes.
Are you from
and
the
stuff.
Azores?
I know enough Azorean people, but no, I'm Cape Verdean in Portuguese.
Okay.
I guess could be Azorean, but we don't like to.
They talk
There's
funny.
a lot of hate amongst people who are Portuguese with each other. So
I know, they
it's
don't
better
like,
not to identify
and then
myself.
they
by
all
that.
don't like Brazilians.
I'll gladly say that Fall River is scum, but I will not identify myself as a type of Portuguese on air, because I see much more problems with that than the city of Fall River as a whole. But no, I worked a small little gathering. It's like a bunch of like Portuguese people who had some money, and they were waiting for the mayor to come to this dinner, and we cooked probably about 70, 80 plates of food. Everyone was there. He showed up for literally 10 minutes, collected the checks, took a plate of food, parked illegally, and took out.
Right.
It was amazing. I was
Is
like,
that-
dude, you can't park here. And he was like, I'm the mayor of Fall River. And I was like, I like this guy already.
Yeah.
Is that
I love-
Jassiel Korea?
Yes.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
he was they said they have a special election that first removed him,
Yes.
but then the second question on it, he got to put his name on the ballot and then was reelected. So,
Yeah.
so like in the same vote, in the same
He was
like,
arrested for extorting cannabis vendors and
Yeah,
building.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a huge one.
Yeah.
That was the big one, because cannabis vendors are owned by a lot of white people, and they are not gonna. They know how to go to court and lawyer up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're gonna take advantage of people, make sure it's people that are minorities. The poor.
J-
Don't
yeah.
go after white
J-
people. You're an idiot.
just rookie mistakes.
Yeah, rookie
Thinking
mistakes,
that, like,
you know what I mean?
yeah, I'm gonna go.
Everyone thinks they can do whatever they want when they're mayor, but
No,
you
no,
can't,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Economics talks more than politics, but again, he's a young man. Is he in prison?
Probably not.
No, he's not in prison. I'm not sure he's still mayor though.
No, he's definitely not mayor.
Some other guy beat
despite
him.
that he would, easily be able to run again.
He didn't just get arrested. He got indicted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was like yeah. He got like the coolest version of getting arrested, I would say.
Oh, is getting indicted cool?
I think it's very cool. I mean, you
Thank
know what I
you.
mean? If somebody uses a different word for you getting your,
That means a lot to me.
getting like a club upside your head and told that you got arrested versus, I got indicted.
Yeah.
It's
like Bernie Madoff over
it's
here.
exactly
Yeah.
it's certain vocabulary that you use in order to just be like, yeah, no, I'm different from you.
Yeah.
And this is why.
This was not a drunk driving situation.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
This
you,
was like-
you got pulled over by some
Yeah.
local cop. No. The FBI had to indict me.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more to what
Yeah,
I've got.
Wolf of Wall Street 2 is going to be based on my life. Actually, I mean, his story would make a cool movie, to be honest.
They will do it. That
They
will happen.
Eventually.
That will happen.
Eventually.
Yeah. I mean, again, huge piece of shit. I'm sure if you're listening right now at this time of night, you can understand that, I don't know, our admiration is a lot more of like a knockoff Scorsese, like,
Right.
Honestly, even the
Scripts.
last election,
Stealing is the highest form of flattery.
the latest election sounds pretty awesome. I haven't followed it, but just like kind of like scanning now, I guess he dropped out and then his like top 8 entered the race as a write-in candidate last minute. And then she didn't win, but this guy Coogan, Paul Coogan, won. And then Coogan said he will get straight to work, but I got to spend a little time with my wife, or I'm going to be single in the bloody office.
Oh, true.
So
Understandable. No, we have to, just everyone keep in
It does
mind that
sound-
most local elections are probably being manipulated by Russian oligarchies outside of our control. So, you know what I mean? When they're being held up, for their water bills and stuff like that, we have to look at every single person and say, that guy will probably take like $5,000. You know what I mean? To do what the Russians
so
as
this
long as it's not developers,
All right.
like
most likely developers too, you know what I mean? Like, if anyone is like, looks weak and like would take $5 or $10, you have to look at that person and be like, how strong is their character? And for the most part, it's not very strong. Like the guy who I met, you know what I mean? I saw him park and I saw him grab a bunch of checks and leave, and I was like, this guy doesn't have very strong character. He won't last in and sure enough, FBI indicted him. Would be nice if I saw that guy told me to go fuck myself when I told him that he parked wrong. I would have been like, this guy's gonna be around for a long time.
Can I go knock doors for you, sir?
Yeah, I would have gladly done that. Listen, man, I know that at the end of the day, if I'm smoking cigarettes, it's best to work for them because they probably have the best insurance plan.
But what you just said, not the Russian stuff, not going off that,
No. That's
is actually a very important point, which is local politics is so much more corrupt than national politics. When you
national politics is pretty damn corrupt right now.
No, it is.
It is. It's mostly because it's on the news and it's easier to identify. But if, John, Dick, and Harry, like down the street, that have maybe 3 or 4 ties to the whole system, at the end of the day, they're going to be easier to run things than, a Bill Clinton or something like that.
Exactly, because in local politics, and again, because a lot of how our media is now structured, none of it gets covered, but local politics is more corrupt than national politics. In local politics, you have a handful of families that own so much property. And again, we're not talking about major cities because things get more complex. But in most cities and towns, at the local level, like the mayor, his brother-in-law is like the developer, and then their sister or
I could
cousin.
name so many names, but I want them to
Yeah.
come as guests in the show, so I won't.
Yeah, that's probably the best.
And
that's kind of how we lost the WMF building, right? Was some guy who owned a bunch of
That's
property.
one of the names I was thinking
Yeah,
of.
that's that's the whole thing. But you know what I mean. At the end of the day,
He's no
as long
longer
as,
mayor, but
it's you just can like if I can do a couple Google searches and figure out that who owns what and where, and it's a lot of it, then I'm just going to be slightly concerned about my chances of doing well around that general area. That's when you're like, I'll just, move
hey,
to Kansas.
just because local government is corrupt doesn't mean you can't do well there.
No, you can't. I mean, at
like
the same time,
sometimes it's corrupt in the right direction.
it can be, and that's the beautiful thing about
1% of the time.
Yeah, people's intentions are what really makes it. That's why you have to kind of look at somebody and be like, yeah, if I give that guy $20 and say, hey, can you get me like that property over there, and then they're like, all right, yeah, cool.
I would love to be able to pay $20 for a
Hey,
property.
listen,
in
I know
Cambridge.
some people have been paid for less. At the end of the day, it's just about like, you know, there are some people like in New Bedford. Again, we'll go back to that. There's a guy there who was fortunate enough to have been left a trust by a lawyer and doctor. He's like a famous kind of like crazy person in New Bedford.
Do I know him?
And maybe,
I used to live around
but
there.
he like runs for mayor every single time based on the money that was given to him in the trust. But other than that, he just, you know, collects cans and walks around the city.
Has he tried wearing a boot on his head?
No, he hasn't. But I mean, I probably saw that was a thing already, and maybe he's had his gimmick for a while. I'm not gonna try and like get into like but I just know that he uses that trust money that could be used for literally anything else.
Okay, yeah.
But runs for mayor with it, and you're like, this guy's clearly got a goal in mind.
It's not the worst that you can do. Phone lines are open, by the way. Will you put up the number on the screen? It's 872-810-2125. We might want to get this show.
I was gonna say, as you're opening the phone lines, I'm just like, oh my god, it's time to wrap up.
I know. That was the Diamond Machine himself. Check out Boston 8-Bit. It was a fun. Actually, I would love to go into New Bedford politics, like a deep dive someday on the show. We should do that. Because I've got exes from there. I used to live around there.
Yeah. So I know that at least with a few things. One that I will give you, which is a very good one, is the New Bedford Guide. If you go to that Facebook page, it's basically there are more people who like the page that are people in the city. I think they have over 100,000 likes, and there's more people than there are in the city. The guy who runs it is an extreme right-wing, like, sociopath who used to be a Marine. And basically what he does is he'll, like, push agendas on there that will, like, purposely get people pissed off. So, like, for one, he was like, do you think that it's okay that people walk around in their PJs? Because that's like a thing. You know, people in the projects, they might go from one place to another. I think we all walk around our PJs. Yeah,
I've walked around.
But there's a lot more of it that is in New Bedford that people like to admit. And for some reason, this guy uses that as a means to like incite people. And they get so many comment threads and so many crazy people just yelling about their things that I made a page a long time ago called the New Bedford Guy. Now, the New Bedford Guy is a play on how Portuguese people talk to each other and say, hey, guy. And when you start typing the word guide, most likely guy would come up first, or at least there'd be a suggestion. And we got a lot of people who were like from public radio.
Dude, your page is down. Your page is down.
Yeah, I took it down, yeah. Because we served our purpose, essentially. The New Bedford Guide blocked us, eventually, because we were just causing too much shit. But we used to have, like, public radio try to reach out to us and be like, hey, can we talk to you on the air? And we'd be like, no, we're just a fake page to harass that page. But, yeah, no, and essentially the page, like, has gotten, like, real fights to happen in the world where people have, like
blows were
have been exchanged in bars because of this page. And,
dude.
And, like...
Local city Facebook groups are insane.
Yeah.
They are amazingly insane, yeah. And the fact that you can just see somebody, because it's Facebook, and you can see their full name, you can reverse look them up on the white pages or whatever.
Or just like, dude,
just go down and fight someone.
No, I just messaged him, like, dude, Joe's Tavern, 7 o'clock.
Yeah. And then that's really all it takes. And most of the people who are, like, running that page are pretty close in with, like, the mayor and things like that, and, like, help, you know, live stream a lot of the big public events that are going on there. And, you know, clearly has found his niche in society, but at the same time, will probably get the shit beaten out of him by someone who is eventually going to be very pissed that his site has caused this kind of riot. But yeah, no, I mean, that's just kind of, you know, what's become our local news, essentially, because the Standard Times used to be our newspaper, and that's kind of, you know, faltered because they have a paid subscription on their site, and their paper keeps going up every single month. So there's no way to get local news without either going on to...
I've had that problem in Boston, too.
Yeah.
I rely on Evan for news unless I'm actually there.
Right,
for most things. I don't have a global
thankfully, Evan is a very honest person, and
he might not be. I think he. I mean,
for you.
No, I mean, I make up all
That's probably
it could be fake news. I don't know. Who am I to say?
Well, the recent statistics says that in 2022 that half the news we read will be fake. So,
I'm
and
sure it
based
is.
on the amount of information and how it moves, like they tell medical students that the things that they learn now, 10 years from now, half of that stuff won't be applicable because they'll find new ways to do it. So, how much of the shit that we're saying right now is even real?
I mean, so that like that's not on the. We have to close up. But you keep saying stuff I want to go off on. So that stuff about like the medical things, a lot of it goes off of this theory of like exponential growth,
Right.
which mostly for the last decade has been
It's the
proven
same
to
with
be false
computer
because
stuff.
we're not investing in any of the things that we used to invest in with technology and medical research in the same way. So it doesn't have the same diminishing returns as that thing you just cited. But what you're just talking about with fake news and going off on Facebook is absolutely true because you just have more.
More
local news is dying. You have these similar with like every
or at least people who claim to be news sources.
Every grouping of society, and what I mean by that is like with the economy, like you have like a handful of airlines, you have a handful of cell phone companies. You now just have a handful of news companies,
right?
And most of us get our news off Facebook, and it's easy to manipulate. And so, like things like that, of like most of what you see will be fake news, is because most people have to rely on free media because you don't have fucking money to pay for subscriptions.
I don't have money to pay for anything. And now that, it's like back to the cell phone thing, Sprint and T-Mobile are now one. And that's only because the guy from T-Mobile, bought way too many hotel rooms in Trump's hotel, over, the time that happened. So, I'm gladly a T-Mobile customer because I'm sure they're going to be the future of 5G because he bought a bunch of hotel rooms and that's what they told me. So, you know what I mean? I'm not going to be, dumb about these kind of things.
Fake news.
Yeah. It could be fake news. At the very least, it's some news.
Yeah. Well, you know what you won't hear here on Renters Radio, folks, is fake news. Well, maybe you will.
You
maybe
will.
you will.
You definitely will.
Oh, yeah.
No,
if we keep having
it'll all be
exactly.
Danny Pryor.
That's why I need to go away.
Thank you for
I'm
coming
not
on,
here to.
Danny.
Yeah, Danny, we'll do a show.
No, don't.
We can join that dating app and get some sponsors.
Yes.
Everybody, date my friend Danny Pryor. It's gonna be great.
But all right, it's late.
It's late, and I don't know what just happened.
No, that was great. Thank you for hopping
awesome.
on, man. Thank you for representing.
I feel
New
like
Bedford.
I've had so much. Yeah, that was New Bedford in a nutshell.
That was a
right
very
there.
good palate cleanser after the Oakland mob getting raided and the anti-homeless architecture just to cause pain for people who have to beg for their food. So
And we have events to plug. Can we plug some events?
Yes.
I have some events to plug. You have some events to plug. Let's start with your events so I can find my events.
Okay. I think I mentioned this on Monday, but tomorrow I will be helping who I consider to be a good friend, Armani, who, if you do any kind of activism in Roxbury or just in Boston, you're probably familiar with him, Armani White. He's running for the Democratic State Committee so that we can just push the Democratic Party further to the left. So tomorrow I will be at the District 7 Tavern, 380 Warren Street in Boston, giving him some money. Come by, say hello, support somebody who is taking the plunge of the hellscape that is local Democratic politics. So tomorrow afternoon,
Where
evening.
is District 7 Tavern?
District 7 Tavern, 380 Warren Street, Boston, Mass.
Okay. Well, that sounds good, and I wish them luck. I got a couple more. Next week, actually, some good old friends are running a lobby day to end civil asset forfeitures in Massachusetts. We will certainly have them on as guests to talk in further detail about this. This is co-hosted by the Massachusetts Pirate Party and Restore the Fourth in Boston. They are meeting at the Capitol Coffee House at 10 a.m. on Bowdoin Street in Boston, going to the State House to lobby against civil asset forfeiture, codename theft, basically, or codename for theft, because that's what it is, and meet with various state reps about how to push forward a bill there's a bill, an act relative to forfeiture reform, S.899, and you can find it on Facebook. I'm actually posting the link in the group chat right now. And follow that, because that's an issue that we don't talk about here too much on Renters Radio, but is one close to my heart. And I would also like to get my property back. Pops, please. Thank you. If there's any Cambridge police listening, I really need my computer back. Also, there's another party here at New Alliance, a silkscreen party, which is next Thursday. Bring your t-shirts, clothes, whatever. We're going to have a silkscreen party with Dave Tree doing a bunch of art. $5 print, and there'll be refreshments served, and you can like meet up with us, and it'll be really fun. Don't just bring shirts, bring whatever you can think. If it's a flat surface, we can probably print something really cool on it.
Yeah.
So come on down to the New Alliance Gallery. It'll be a silkscreen party and clothing swap. This is next Thursday, January 23rd from 7 to 11, and it'll be rad. And I pretty much want everybody to come to everything over here because this is an amazing space, and that's all I got.
Oh, great way to end it. I am supposed to do the FEC filing for Bernie Sanders on that day, but I will make it. I will be there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we'll see.
Bring some t-shirts.
Yeah, I'll commit to it now.
Bring your pink t-shirt.
Oh, yeah, I have cool t-shirts.
Yeah.
I do. I got some nice
It would look
tank
even
tops.
better with a Dave Tree print on it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we'll see.
And then also, yeah, that's about it. We'll be back next week. We're not really doing Wednesdays. We're doing Mondays. So we'll be back next Monday, 8:30, 9 p.m.-ish. Like and subscribe. Follow our podcast. We're Renters Radio on everything. Donate to our Patreon. Also Renters Radio. Send us an email, rentersradio@gmail.com. And reach out. We are continuing to grow. 2020 is our year, and it's like a big year for rent control. So stay tuned.
Whoop, whoop.
We'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.